kind of owned it after that, to be honest. I was like able to come out of that and I was like, do you know what? Like, I am this person. I'm proud of how far I've come because it was really hard. But also, I make mistakes. And if I own them, it's way easier to like move past them. So that's kind of when after that I really became more public about, you know, people would ask why I wasn't drinking, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm alcoholic, you know, that's why I'm not drinking. And happy to talk about it.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Hello and welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. I am Bryce and this is my wonderful co-host, Liz. What's up, Liz?
Hey, Bryce. So psyched to be here with you today. I think I've overused the word excited lately, but I'll probably do it again because I'm so excited about our guest today, our conversation today, and to see you because you've been away for a little while. So welcome back.
Yeah. Thanks. Tell us a little bit about our guest, Liz. I know you're super excited. And like I was telling our guests before we got on, anytime Liz gets excited, I get excited. And hopefully with us both excited, who's ever listening to this episode will get excited and it'll just be excitement all around. So please tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Yeah. So we're welcoming today Angus Morton, who is a friend of the Phoenix, who is a film director and a sportsman and a person in recovery. From Australia, which is extra cool, I think. And coming to us, I think, from California today, if I'm not mistaken. Very cool. And just fresh off of recording a new film, which I'm excited to hear about along with his story. So yeah, Angus, how are you doing today? How's today?
Today's great. G'day, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm doing really well today. It's
nice.
It's sunny here. Weather's good. You know, can't complain.
Yeah, what part of Cali are you in?
I'm in Los Angeles, in Echo Park.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I just got back. So got back from SF,
right?
San Francisco.
Whereabouts are you both?
So I'm in Detroit. Liz is in Florida.
Damn.
Yeah, we're all around the world.
3 points covered.
Yeah. So how's your energy today, man?
It's good. Yeah. Today's a good day so far. I've just come back actually from being out in Nashville on a pretty hectic shoot, or a couple of week shoot actually. But so this week's been nice to like get back into the routine. As I was saying to you guys before, I have a new dog, a new puppy who I'm sort of learning to care for, which is really nice. So it's good just being hanging out with him and yeah, just, you know, doing my self-care routine, which is, I hate that expression, but it's really important to me.
It's like the expression.
That's what you gotta do.
It's like the expression has been gentrified or something like that. But like,
right.
Like self-care though, in essence is super important. And, you know, the more we seek a relationship with ourselves, the more we learn like what means self-care to us. So I guess that's a good segue. Like, what, besides taking care of rescue dogs, what other things do you do for self-care?
I do a lot of meditation. I try to do daily meditation. I got introduced to that quite a number, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when I was first kind of exploring getting sober, and it was really effective. And I'm one of those people that, you know, I'm like, meditation, that sounds like some BS, right? You know, like self-care, come on, like, you know, you just got to like suffer through it. I'm an athlete. I come from an endurance sport background, and the whole ethos is just suffer through it. So anyway, I reluctantly did it, and it made a huge effect. So that's a big part of my self-care. Journaling as well. Another thing I thought I would never do is also a really good part of it. So those are my two sort of morning things, and then I do a lot of running and cycling. So exercise. gym as well.
Meditation wise, is there like a specific way that you meditate, or like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I was introduced to meditation like through mindfulness practice.
Okay.
And so I do a lot of like breathing, meditation, and I guess just like, I don't know what it's called, but you just like emptying the mind, allowing thoughts to come and go.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
like
call that a magic trick.
Right, exactly. So I do that sort of thing a lot, and then I'll just do focus exercises, things like that. But I haven't really, to be honest, ventured too far out into the meditation worlds. I have a couple of friends who are really into like Vedic meditation and transcendental meditation and things like that. Yeah. But I've honestly I wouldn't even know what those are. Really. Yeah. So I'd like to explore more of that, but at the moment it's just, like 20, 30 minutes a day.
Okay. No, and that's big too. I mean, like 30 minutes a day, it take a lot to sit down for 30 minutes, especially somebody like me who never sat for a second because I was always looking for the next thing. That was some of my character defects and my active addictions. I needed, and still today, like I can get that inclination, like something has to be happening. So I need to be doing something, especially as a creative. I'm sure you can relate, where it's like, okay, I need to be making something. I need to be doing something. Yeah. That's where I get my work from. You know, so to sit down, even
100%.
Even without like something official to call it, and I've been practicing for a few years, and I just at that retreat I was telling you about. Just learned like how to do Vipassana, and it was cool to get that formal training. But a lot of times we got to bootstrap and just put together what works for us.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear about that. I mean, you just said sitting still for 30 minutes a day is pretty good, but you just did like 7 days.
Oh my goodness!
Speaking. I mean, that's impressive.
So we definitely want to dig more into you and what makes you interesting. But so I'll keep this very short. I'm just getting back from a 7-day silent meditation retreat, and it was 7 days of renunciation, no phone, no talking to people. They actually even discouraged looking people in their eyes. We would get together twice a day in the Dharma hall and retrieve like Dhamma talks, and we had a panel of 5 teachers that a different teacher would speak every time we sat down and would kind of give us insight into how to meditate using Vipassana. And Vipassana is like insight meditation, mindfulness meditation, where you're not pushing anything away nor pulling anything towards you. You're just seeing what's there and investigating what's there and collecting data that allows for us to cultivate wisdom in how we show up in life. And when I say like from you wake up in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, to nighttime where you go to bed, like the last session is like 9 p.m., all day, sitting, walking, standing meditation, sitting, walking, lying down meditation all day. And even when we sat down, we're sitting down for 45 minutes at a time. And longest I've ever meditated at one time, but I've noticed my capacity now that I'm back. Like I meditate. Before I left, I was doing like 10, 15 minutes in the morning, but now I'm more inclined to do like 30 minutes like you do, Gus. And it's interesting, man. When I first left, I felt like I was just sitting and thinking. And now that I have some formal instruction, like I think I have some meat, some structure behind what it is that I'm doing when I'm sitting. So I would recommend it. I also will put the asterisk, just like anything worthwhile in our lives, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds fascinating. It's something that, maybe my meeting you today is the thing that will push me to explore that more. Because I've definitely, read about people doing those sort of things and always thought, that could be interesting. Maybe that'll be my future. And maybe this is you're the person that's just going to push me over to investigate. Because I think like I said, I was a reluctant engager in meditation, in all things sort of self-care. And, but I could not express how important it's been to me. Like it's incredible how much of an impact just sitting in silence makes. your point before about the idea of what is productivity and needing to feel like you're always doing something in order to like have worth. And then, so the idea of sitting still and taking that time out is like sacrilegious, but it's genius.
It's filling you up. It's putting your oxygen mask on so you can put it on for somebody else. That's what Bryce and I were talking about that before. And I mean, you do that for the world in a lot of different ways. So I think you being like the most nourished and healthy version of you is an act of service. Like that's incredibly productive outside of yourself as well.
Right. And it's thinking it's all perspective and coming at it from that way is.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned you got into meditation and mindfulness at the beginning of your recovery. So what has recovery looked like for you? Like how did you enter into recovery? What does recovery mean to you? How do you define your recovery, et cetera, et cetera?
You know, my recovery started in May 20 in 2020. 2020, yeah, 2020. And for me, how that came about, it was during the pandemic. You know, my sort of, I had spiraled, you know, during the beginning of the pandemic, and honestly, one day I just woke up and it was sort of like a battle of, you know, I'm a very, I guess, determined person and stubborn person, and it became essentially the battle of two things. I had this desire to achieve things like in work, in creativity, that I wanted to do, and then I also had this desire to just get shit faced all the time, and those two things were fighting each other. And honestly, it got to that point where I really had an honest conversation with myself, where I was like, if I want to achieve some of these things, you know, like my desire to achieve and create like certain things in my life outweighed the desire to be wasted all the time. Just, you know, on this one particular day, that scale was tilted in favor of doing other things with my life. And so I woke up and honestly was just like, today's the day, and called, like found an online, because it was the first time I'd ever really gone, I need to go to get treatment to get sober, because every time I've tried to do it alone, it hasn't worked. And so we're in the middle of a pandemic. I was like, I can't go anywhere. And fortunately there are a lot of online programs. And during the pandemic, I wasn't really doing much. You know, obviously no one was necessarily at the beginning. So I was able to get into an online program really quickly, and then that honestly, like once, like from the first session of that, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and it appealed like initially to my competitive nature. You know, the idea of like, all right, now it's a game. I've gamified this thing, which in all honesty, like that was a good thing to begin with. You know, because it stopped me from drinking. Like it was, you know, like my counselor was like, whatever to stop you from drinking. And then eventually we had to break that way of thinking and actually get to the
screw
root of
you
the problem.
attitude only takes you so far.
Totally. And it took, so to answer your specific question, like recovery for me has begun in May 2020, and it's been a process of learning self-care, understanding my thought processes, and then also obviously stopping you know, drinking, and my addiction was alcohol. So stopping the physical practice of that, but then also like working on and working at understanding the reasons why I was doing it. And so I guess understanding the thought processes, and then working backwards from there, and being critical, but also gentle with myself, which I'd never done before. I'd always sort of been the exact opposite of that. Harsh on myself, but very like excusatory of my behavior, and sort of like so gentle
in a different way.
Yeah, well, exactly. So exactly, like understanding that, okay, you have, like, these are things that you have done and you have to accept the responsibility for those, which was a big part. You have to accept that you're never going to be able to do this thing that you did all the time ever again. And all of that's fine. And you can do all of that. And here's how we're going to slowly do that. And we're going to work at it each day. And it is day to day. Another thing that I really hated when we first started was the day to day. Just take it day by day. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
No,
but it's so true. It's so true. Like one day at a time. And it is. It's still is like that for me, you know.
Yeah, you're an all-in person
and
for
that's
sure.
Fine. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I feel kind of corny saying things like, you know, one day at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But it's like truly, genuinely, like that's how I access my ability to be able to show up sometimes. You know, when I try to take a big bite and it becomes too much, like that's what kept me running. And I think something you touched on, and I think that like the athletes or like the people that are goal oriented can definitely relate to that. Is that, you know, when you came in, like you began to gamify this thing. But the thing about a game is like there's a goal, and when we get the goal, it's like how we won, right? So it's like, I'm going crazy till I get this goal. But like in recovery, I don't know about you, but for me in recovery, like there is the goalpost shifts and it's up sometimes and it's down and it's sideways, and it's like it's very hard to say if I'm winning or not. I don't know what's going on, you know,
right?
So yeah. So that transition.
And there's danger if you think you did.
Yeah. So if
you think you did win, like I know about, right, exactly, yeah. And then it's like I'm good now, I'm all better, and now I can go back. Right. I know that's something you've talked about a little bit, Angus, is like that the relapse piece, which is such a big part of so many of our stories. And for me, that was every time I was like, I won, you know, like I did it, and then I'm going to celebrate with a bottle of something, like a big, you know, like as if I'd learned nothing. So, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that. And I think that's something that really speaks to a lot of people.
Well, both of you just said a couple of really interesting things. The idea of gamifying and having a goal. You know, and I think initially, like, that's what I was doing, right? And it was sort of like, let's just get to 1 month, let's get to 90 days, and I relapsed on I think it was 89, and then but before I get into that, I just want to also say, Liz, when you mentioned like relapse being part of it, when one of the very first times I tried to get sober, which is like 7 or 8 years ago, I was seeing a counselor, and she, who introduced me to mindfulness meditation, and she had said that there's like an average of 8 relapse cycles in like, you know, you get sober, then you relapse, and I think it was 8 was her number, and I just remember being like thinking, like not being able to process that, being like, this is like, that's insane. Yeah. That's so many. And then honestly, like I was 24 or 5 at that point in time. And it took me until I was 30 to get sober. So like I would have done that, you know, like I went through more cycles than that of like, anyway, so that was, that's, was really interesting to me. And a lot of these things make sense now, being on the other side of it, but having to like explain that to a pre-sober me was impossible.
Did it help to have that in the back of your head?
It did, like, yeah. And it was kind of, I think like there was a humility that came with getting sober. Like I never liked asking for help, and I did ask for help and it worked. And so there was sort of like swallowing my pride a bit there, which there isn't even, by the way, there is no pride that needs to be swallowed when you ask for help. That's just crazy. And so there was that. And then also going, oh, I've been taught this before. I've been shown these numbers. This has been explained to me, and it's not that difficult of a concept to grasp. Like you just have to accept it and do it. And like it's not even that long of amount of time. Because like another thing that, you know, I kind of did was was when I woke up and got sober. Was I woke up and it was however many years later, and I was like, you've been aware of the problem that you have for 6, 7, 8, like years, very long time. And you're like, if you had have just done the work to begin with, you'd be so far past it by now. Like, what the hell? Like, and it doesn't feel like that long. Looking back on it, it doesn't feel like a long time. But when it's in front of you, it does feel like a long time. So that was another thing I sort of thought, well, the more you continue on with this, you're just burning it. You're just burning time. Like and you could have done the thing and you would have been through it now, and it would have sucked for a bit, but you'd be through it now. And so that was like also part of it was just going, okay, I'm actually going to take on board this advice and I'm going to practice the very simple things that I was told to do, and they're simple but really effective. And so anyway, I've gotten distracted. I think I was supposed to be talking about the process of relapse and how that, I guess, like factored into my recovery. And so the first time
you're supposed to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I was getting to that because that's like to tie the goal orientated thing that Bryce was talking about and what you're talking about relapse, Liz, like, and then to tie in this film, I guess that is how this conversation kind of came together initially was I've written a film about both of those two things that we're just wrapping up shooting on in the next few months and hopefully will be out in the next year. But my goal-orientated experience, right, was basically like, okay, if I can get to 90 days, like that's sort of the end line. I hadn't thought past that. And then I basically got to 90 days and I was like, do you know what? I actually don't think I'm an addict. It's been pretty easy to stop, like it's been pretty easy to just like muscle through this thing. And I've been going to treatment and doing all that. And I was like, I'm on holidays. Maybe I'll just like give drinking a go again. And like instantly bad, obviously. And I fell off the wagon for a couple of weeks. And then my girlfriend at the time was like, you're not fine. And I was like, you're right. And so I went back to treatment and got going. And honestly, I needed, this sounds messed up, but I needed that to happen because when I got back into treatment, I was like, okay, this isn't a game anymore. Well, this isn't a game anymore. I need to take this more seriously and not just play lip service to some of the things that they're talking about. All of this stuff is a stepping stone, by the way. Like you don't just get sober and you're all of a sudden virtuous and humble and all the time and like, considered and like none of that. You become that, but it's like so incremental, just because you've like stopped the act. Anyway, so and so I started to take it seriously and more seriously and kind of like when I say more seriously, I mean less of a like I opened my mind to what was being told to me, as opposed to sort of being like, okay, I'll just nod my head and say yes and do the exercises and show up in class and say the things that they want me to say, because I could recognize like that was what these people were after. But I won't actually internalize any of that. And then so after that first relapse, I began to internalize it. And then at the same time, we were putting together an expedition across Iceland, like a winter expedition on fat bikes to basically chart a route, like bisect Iceland in like a direct straight line. In the winter, Iceland's completely covered in snow. And so you can essentially, once you're up in the highlands, which occupy most of the center of the country, you can basically just go wherever you want because it's just like a snowy ocean. And so we wanted to do this 350-mile journey, be the first to do it. And Iceland's really unique because the weather's very volatile because it's an island and it's so far north. You're getting the humidity from the ocean, so it's quite a humid cold. And you also so that's kind of more biting and more difficult as a human to kind of like exist in over, say, a dry cold. And then you have the volatility of the weather and the wind because of the ocean and the cold, hot kind of, or the cold and warmer ocean kind of situation. So anyway, so you have very volatile weather and you need very specific conditions, and it's quite challenging. And so I began, there was a team of 3, Chris Burkhart, who's a photographer and an adventurer, and then Rebecca Rush, who's a really, she's like a 10-time world champion or something on mountain bike. She's a legend, basically. So I was with very good company, and we set out to do this mission, and it was sort of 6 months down the track. As that began sort of a month or so after I'd had the relapse, and so it was something that I could really focus on again. And I just shifted my focus from being like, I'm going to go 90 days sober to I just need to train for this expedition. So I didn't really realize it at the time. And so sure, I was taking my treatment more seriously, but I wasn't really aware of how just like ingrained and subconscious my, like, I don't know what you want to call it, like prey drive was, like my like competitive nature was. And I just switched it. And long story short, the next 6 months leading up to this expedition went by very easily. I continued my treatment, but my cravings and all of those sort of things like really disappeared. And it was very much, sure, I went through post-acute withdrawal and I was having those issues, but one, having the knowledge prior through treatment, having the knowledge that these things were going to occur was really helpful. But also, two, having this goal of like, all you have to do is just get through it, just muscle through it. Because when you get out there on the ice, when you finish this mission, like, you'll have like conquered it. And so we went up there, we did the mission. It was crazy. I got frostbite, like all of this, like intense experience over the 7 days of completing this mission. And we completed it. And at the end of the mission, I kept my sobriety kept my addiction. I mean, at least like verbally, I'd kept it quiet. I think a lot of people knew that I had a problem, but no one really spoke about it. But I'd kept my addiction and my sobriety really like between my counselors that I was working with and my partner at the time. And it took me a long time to even tell my parents like that I was doing it, because I could in the pandemic. And in hindsight, I wish I had have welcomed everybody in at the beginning, because everyone was so supportive and so helpful for that. That was a learning. But anyway, so I'd kept it. And at the end of this mission across Iceland, I just said to the rest of the team, look, like, I'm an alcoholic and I never thought I would be able to do this. At the time, I can't remember how many months sober I was. It was nearly up to like a year since I began my sobriety journey. And they were like, whoa. And I was like, this is really important to me. And thank you for letting me do this. And I was sort of like, I've done it. I've done the thing I didn't think I'd be able to do sober. I was able to focus. I was able to do all of these things. I'm so proud of myself. I'm cured. And and then traveling back from that expedition, it was still during the pandemic, and there was a travel restriction in place that was supposed to have changed whilst we were out there, and it didn't change. And so it meant that the rest of the crew, because they were all American, could travel home. But me being Australian, I couldn't travel directly to the US. And I actually got stuck in Mexico. I was trying to board a plane to the US, and they stopped me and said I have to stay in Mexico for 2 weeks before I'm allowed to travel back to the US. And that caught me really off guard. And I was coming down off of the trip. And all of a sudden I found myself, I'd been on the road for a long time, and I found myself stuck in Mexico City, and I freaked out. And then that led to another relapse, basically. And that's kind of, and I was blindsided by that in a major way. And again, like, huge learnings came from that. Like, oh, you just did this thing, and you thought that you would be cured just because it was like a metric that you could tick off. But like, that's not what this process is. It's ongoing. It's forever. and that's, you have to make peace with that. And so then that began kind of understanding and really accepting that, but also like I was able to really clearly recognize that the subconscious nature of my competitiveness, like my goal orientation, and understand that it can work for you, and sometimes it can work against you other times. And so
Angus, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious because I think for a lot of people, I know myself included, one of the reasons that we don't share early on to people around us that we're trying to get sober is because we're so afraid that if we screw up, everybody's going to know. I told them. So now it's going to be so much harder if I fall. If I don't even tell them I'm trying, then it's just going to be same old person that's doing the things that they know. So you had the relapse without really a lot of people knowing, and then you told people, had that support, and then it happened again. Was that like a totally different feeling?
Yeah, and it was like the first time I was like excited to do it, and then the second time it was so obvious, and so disappointing, and but also like kind of really like it was very emblematic of how much I'd changed as well, because like I'm just trying to think of a good analogy, but the only analogy I'm coming up with is it's like being an addict. You
just like that.
Yeah, like you get a taste of it and then you go crazy. Mm-hmm. And then when you snap out of it, you're like, yeah, I don't want to be that person. And I really didn't recognize that person anymore either, which I think was definitely a positive thing. Like I was like, whoa, like I remember you, but like that's not you. Like, and not only is that not you, but like it wasn't
you denounced your identity.
Yeah. And so like it was a really like affirming, I mean, I didn't need to go through it, sure, but it was very affirming of that I'm on the right path and that I've made the right decision and that I've grown immensely, even though sometimes it feels like you haven't. Like you were saying, Bryce, it goes up and down and up and down. I still am always like, sometimes I'm down, sometimes I'm up, but it was really affirming that, oh, I have gone somewhere, even though I thought that I'd be cured from this trip, the learnings that I got from that were far more subtle and they were different and no less important. They're just not as obvious. They didn't just like hit me over the head with the cure. They were wanting me to do more, and it was asking more of me. And so that like it was affirming in that way, but yeah, also I kind of owned it after that, to be honest. I was like able to come out of that and I was like, do you know what? Like I am this person. I'm proud of how far I've come because it was really hard, but also I make mistakes, and if I own them, it's way easier to like move past them. And so that's kind of when after that I really became more public about, people had asked why I wasn't drinking, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, that's why I'm not drinking. And happy to talk about it. So anyway, yeah, that kind of, it changed. And then I wrote a film about it as a way of processing the whole thing and kind of learning from it, I guess.
I think the most beautiful part of the process is the ability to collect that data around who it is that we are. When we're doing these things to modulate our nervous system, like we're numbing up, and in numbing up, there is no realization, there is no learning about who it is that we are. It's just like, okay, when this thing happens, or when I get to this point in my life, like when somebody pisses me off like this, or when it gets this difficult, like I'm gonna just drink, I'm gonna just get high. But like when we have these moments of, okay, I am setting out to discover what it's like when I don't do that. And learning these things, even if relapse is a part of that, like when that relapse happens, because of our intention of discovering more about ourselves, it's like, oh, so this thing that blindsided me, like that I was not expecting, like caused me to do this thing. So now there's data here that I can collect that helps to cultivate wisdom, versus beforehand where there was no intention to cultivate wisdom. I'm just kind of just numbing up. So all of it, and that's one thing that I've learned one way that I've learned to kind of define my recovery is each and every experience is necessary for the higher learning, for the higher understanding, for discovering more who it is that I am. And in discovering who it is that I am, I can contribute at a larger capacity or in a more in tune capacity. And I think I want to kind of like lean towards the contribution here, Gus, when we're talking about, so I wrote a film about it. Not everybody thinks that. I just want to let you know. Being a creative, like not everybody thinks like, so I wanted to take it and I wanted to storytell so that I can inspire other people. And maybe this can be the catalyst in their journey. So tell us a little bit about the process of filmmaking. Were you a creative mind before the lucidity around recovery, or was this something that kind of just came to your mind to do in the midst of recovery? What has that process been like for you?
Yeah, so I studied film at university or college, but essentially, like I was a professional athlete from the age of 18 to 21, road cycling. During that part of my career, I became really interested in film and documentary film just by virtue of the people that I was meeting. So I studied it and got a degree, and then went and worked in television. I sort of decided that cycling, I was done with that. Went and worked in TV. So it's been a big part of my life, going on like 12 years now. And it's always been like very human-centered storytelling. And I think like, or like personal journey storytelling, I guess. And kind of like figuring out, I guess, why we think, or not why but like why individuals think, as individuals. And learning how we can like sort of learn from that, I guess. And so, yeah, that was that's sort of my background in film, and we were making a film about this trip anyway, because we wanted to. I mean, because that's kind of like it's my job, and it's a way for us to do expeditions like that, right? To have these experiences, you get a bunch of brands on board and you make them a film, and they essentially pay for the trip. And so that was the case. And when what happened, I wasn't intending to tell that story necessarily. And Chris, one of the other guys that was on the trip, was like, oh, he didn't know I'd relapsed. And he sort of said, man, I can't imagine getting stuck in Mexico after that trip. All I wanted to do was be home. And he was like, we should kind of think about maybe telling the story from that perspective. And I was like, well, here's actually what happened. And they were like, oh, this is sort of a week or so after it had happened. And then that I was like, well, if you want to do this, can you let me sort of combine essentially this documentary element with a scripted element that is my story, but it's a fictionalized version of it in a sense, changes timings and places and characters, but it's essentially my experience of relapse in Mexico, the amalgamation of the two times, because both times happened in Mexico, by the way. But so anyway, Mexico, so that was like the beginning of the
Mexico.
Yeah, and so that kind of like kicked it off, and then we began. I began writing, and so I'm a director, I guess, and do in nonfiction is my main work, but I'm trying to do more in, like, I've always wanted to do scripted, and I did scripted at the beginning of my career. Like the first stuff I directed was scripted. And I sort of moved away from that, and I want to go back to it. And so I was like, all right, like there's probably a feature film in there. Let me write it, and we can go from there. And so I wrote it, and then once I did a version of it, or several versions of it, then we got a really good screenwriter to come on board, who's got a lot of experience in feature films, has made and made a lot of really successful feature films. And so we got him on board to basically take what I'd done and kind of make it better. And which is really
cool.
rewarding and really fun. And then so that was sort of the process. And in honestly, in that process, it allowed me to process it. And I think that's honestly what motivated me to do it when I heard when Chris was sort of like, oh, why don't we explore the Mexico element? I was still trying to work out what happened in my mind. Like, how did this happen? What happened? It wasn't like a light switched on and I was able to just really quickly be like, oh, here were the sort of surreptitious thought processes that were going on.
So it's kind of cathartic for you.
Really cathartic. And I was able to like process a lot of old stuff as well. Because I really had to like, films are dramatic, right, by nature. And structurally there's dramatic tension and so you need drama. And so you're writing the film and you're making these moments dramatic. And they are. And I wanted to make a film I wanted to tell a story that represented more of my experience with addiction, which was far less of a like the rock bottom is bar fights and sleeping on the street. And it's not that. And my recovery wasn't, oh, I'm 20 years sober and I'm a wise old soul that has been right ever since the moment I stopped drinking. Like that, those are two extremes which I feel like are really well represented in the media. But it wasn't true to my experience. Mine was way more middle of the road. My rock bottom was like this slow erosion.
I think the other thing that really sets you apart, Angus, is that you had so many big, beautiful things in your life that you were doing. Like you knew all these things that you loved prior to recovery. Like we hear, especially at the Phoenix, about so many folks who, had all those rock bottoms, got sober, and then they start discovering all these things that they love to do and the way they want to share their story. And you had that on both sides. And I know we're coming on time, so I don't want to, I know we only have so much but I'm just so fascinated by that because you had your stuff, you had your joy, and you were able to still have it on the other side, just in a way that was probably more authentic to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And like, I sort of say like sport and my sport being cycling was the thing that nearly killed me, like the thing that destroyed me. Not that I was near death, but if, I kept going the way that I was going, that's what would happen. And but it's also like strangely the thing that saved me. Like and my relationship with sport is such a fraught one. And so many issues as a result of just trying to be really good at it. I developed all of these, issues, flaws, whatever, character traits that led me to become an addict. And I couldn't make peace with myself because I couldn't be the athlete that I thought I could be. And that wasn't fine in my mind. It is totally fine. Like, who cares? And it led me down this path. And then when I started getting sober, or when I got sober, I found that I could like go for a bike ride and it'd just be fun. And I could go for a run and I'm like, wow, this is just fun. There's no self-loathing here. There's no like kind of conflict and like feelings of inadequacy. Like it's actually really fun to do this. And Phoenix was a big part of that too, actually. Strangely enough, I've always hated the gym, but found something fun about it with you guys. And anyway, so like, yeah, to your point about like, I had these things that I loved and I was able to carry them over to the other side, but they look much different. I even think with filmmaking too, like I'm the same because I harbor, I think beforehand, I just wanted to be good at it. And I wasn't willing to understand that it would take time and that opinions and all of these things that you need in order to tell a story or a point of view, they come with time and experience. For some people, those are really quickly there, and for other people, they're not. But you just have to like continue working and they'll come. I was really impatient. And afterwards, now I'm like, all right, like I really love doing this, and it's really hard work, and it's exhausting and all of these things, but it's satisfying, and I'm kind of fine with it taking a long time to get good at it. And maybe, I mean, I'm hoping that this film that we're making will be good. I'm hoping that people will watch it within the sober community and feel inspired, but also outside of it and be like, oh wow, that's a different point of view. I had no idea that like that was what the experience was like. Because for me, before getting sober, like my idea of what it was to get sober and what sober people were like was so different and so narrow. Like
it's not like us, not like me.
Well, just not like, I don't even know what I thought it was now that I think about it. But it was like a pigeonhole, which is insane.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I thought it was. Dry, boring.
Exactly. Get away from me.
Nothing like that. It turned out to be the most colorful, emotional, raw, meaningful, creative, passionate experience I could ever have asked for. And I couldn't even have imagined that it would be anything like what it is. Like my furthest imaginations couldn't have took me to where it is that my recovery is taking me. And as for your movie, I'm pretty sure I have a very big inclination that people are going to love it, especially if it's anything like the story that you've told here today, because I've seen it all. Like I'm a visionary person, so I'm seeing you out on the bikes, on the fat tire bikes and all type of stuff like that. So I'm excited to see the film. So
awesome.
how can people tune in, tap in? When is the film releasing? How can people get involved?
Yeah, so we're actually just in the process of doing a distribution deal now. We explored a few different avenues, and then we ultimately decided we were going to self-fund it so that we would have complete creative control. But in that process, we actually managed to do a deal with a distributor or make progress with one. And so that way, everyone else doesn't have to pay for it. They can. And it will be ideally available next year for people to watch. So we have we have to edit it, and we have a little bit more shooting to do on location in Mexico City. Which is cool. So like finish off a few final sequences, and then we just we'll get it out there. So hopefully
amazing.
Finish. So there's a trailer, and it's funny. It's funny, like doing this. There's like an internal trailer that is used, kind of when you're like for distributors and that sort of stuff that like shows more of the story. Then there's the public facing one, which is more the adventure. But anyway, as I can only share the public one, but I think as like, people in recovery, the other version would be far more like representative of what the film is like, but I think too far more relatable as to like what, the experience of getting sober and relapse and all of that is like. But anyway, I'm excited for it. And terrified, but that's how you're supposed to be, I guess.
Those are the best. That is the prerequisite to some of the best experiences in my life. Excited and terrified at the same time. I'm telling you. And now we had a capacity to be able to sit with those feelings and allow for them to be.
What's a message you would give to a previous version of yourself? Doesn't matter whether it's child you, a year ago you, 2 years ago you, and it doesn't even have to be advice. What is a message you might give to old Angus?
I think it would be to be kind to yourself. The thing is, I would give this advice, and I know my old self wouldn't take it, but but let's pretend that he would. Like even if my future self gave a younger self, like if I was a younger self seeing my future version of me give me advice, I don't think I would have taken it.
Neither would I.
But I would, I'd say be kind to yourself and listen. Just listen. I don't think I ever really listened. And because I think for me, if I really genuinely listened to what people were saying, I would have gotten sober a lot earlier, because I would have realized that the tools were there, and that people were willing to help, and that life was actually better on the other side of or being in recovery. And so it would have been to listen. I think that would, at least for me, would have unlocked like a lot of doors. So yeah.
Well, even if Angus wouldn't listen to Angus, I think somebody else that is going to hear this will listen, and that's
I
really
hope
powerful.
so.
So thank you for sharing that.
It's been an adventure of an episode. Keep me and Liz posted about this movie premiere, man. We
definitely
come out and check it out, and let's stay connected. I'll give you all the information about that meditation retreat if that's something you'd like to look deeper
that would
into.
be. I would legitimately love that.
All right.
Yeah, and we will post all the ways to connect with you in the show notes on Instagram. Sure. We'll post the trailer, ways to support. And really, really grateful. Thank you for taking the time to share your story and your wisdom.
Not at all. I mean, I feel like with this, it's funny doing the film. Like, I've done a little bit of press recently, and it's the first time I've sort of spoken like about like addiction or my recovery, like to strangers, essentially, or not strangers, but to like in a public forum.
We're not strangers anymore, I guess.
No, and I find, but like in a public setting, and I find that I just go for it, and just say everything.
Why
don't
not?
stop talking. I just go in so anyway, I apologize if it's like you get in there and you're like, this guy never shuts up, and he goes.
No, this is what that space is for.
Without finishing
this is exactly what the space is for.
You did it right.
I appreciate it.
Perfect. No, we appreciate it. All right. Well,
cool.
Catch you next time, everybody.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.